Welcome to the NCFE podcast, a podcast dedicated to training, education, lifelong learning, and supporting progression into sustainable employment from leading education charity NCFE, featuring guests from across the sector.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Turner from NCFE. I'm the policy specialist, and we have some fabulous guests this morning for our next instalment of the NCFE podcast. So if I can start and just ask everybody to introduce themselves, and we go around. Becky, thanks to you.
Hi, I'm Becky Newton, Director of Public Policy Research at the Institute for Employment Studies.
Thank you very much. Dan, can I ask you next?
Hi, yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Dan Howard, and I'm Operations Director at NCFE for Learning for Work.
Fabulous. And Kathleen.
Hi there, my name is Kathleen Hennihan. I'm a Senior Analyst at the Resolution Foundation working on employment and skills.
Wonderful. And last but definitely not least, Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Parkin. I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Employability Professionals. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Right, our theme is making the UK employable, plan for jobs and building back better. As we know, there's been a bit of a little issue over the last 12 months or so with regards to a certain pandemic, which has either accelerated some of the issues that we currently have with regards to the employability and employability programs, or has just raised their profile even further to where they actually were at that moment in time. The idea of this morning's debate and discussion is to just have a chat about what it is, where we're at, what we think about it all, where can we go from here, what can we actually do, and you know, to make things better, more approachable, more accessible, and whether or not what's actually happening out there at the moment is actually doing its job or will do its job with regards to the current situation. Just before I ask Becky to give a little bit of a background about the whole employability and welfare to work programs, I just did a small bit of research I did this morning, very quickly, just looking at what the current Plan for Jobs program is all about when it was introduced in September last year. And according to the website, there are 85 separate initiatives currently running that either support businesses, people, or various other things. And there's a number of those which are sort of directly related to the area we're going to look at this morning, including things like the job retention bonus, or the furloughs, everybody knows it, kickstart, restart, traineeships, cash incentive for apprenticeships, sector-based work academies, National Career Service funding boost, high-value courses for young people, expanded youth offer, increased number of work coaches, work and health program extensions, job finding support, flexible support fund, build back better, construction talent retention scheme, all the green initiatives that are currently going on. And we'll also have the National Skills Fund, under which we have lifelong learns, boot camps, lifetime skills guarantee. There's a huge amount of things and stuff going on out there at the moment. Basically, will it do the job? Has anything been there before? And will what's there actually solve the current situation? So I'm going to ask Becky if she wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of a history, a little bit of a background about the welfare to work programs and employability and how it's all come about.
So, I guess the urgency, or the real pressing nature of this started to emerge with the pandemic and the realisation of the effect this was likely to cause. We've been in recessionary environments before. We've seen the impact, particularly around some particular subgroups within the population. So young people, specifically disabled people with long-term health conditions, likely to be left further behind. We're also, within this environment, seeing the pandemic have differential effects on different, again, groups in the population. So ethnic minority groups particularly hard hit because of where they work, as well as living in intergenerational households often. Also that overlap into deprived communities. And then the sectoral hits really, where retail has seen a massive hit from this, as has hospitality, tourism, and so forth. Um, and there are intersections around that with where some groups are more likely to work. So it's quite a complicated effect, and it sits within an environment where we already had megatrends starting to hit what we were seeing in our economy. So rising automation, the need to address climate change and aging demographic. So all these things start to mix together to create this urgency around a response. And I think you picked up, Paul, quite well. Um, we certainly have a response, and I think one of the issues is around the complexity that it offers. I mean, I was very keen to see a skills-based response to this recession that was clear was going to come around. That fits with long-standing ambitions to try and increase the skills in our economy, sort of make our economy a bit more productive. That would help us move from entry-level work, sort of a slightly sort of increased skills levels in that. I think we can't lose sight of the quality of jobs as we recover too. So we do have a plethora of initiatives, as you said, from incentives around apprenticeships. We've got the Kickstarter jobs, which offer, again, incentives. There are incentives around traineeships. We've got some really interesting stuff connecting people to employers, so the sector-based work academies, the boot camps model. I think we've got some interesting dynamics around how far this sits within human capital approaches and how far this is within work first approaches, and lessons from the past might indicate we need to sort through that a little bit. But for me, and I suppose my starting point, sort of with all that range of initiatives, is how we guide people towards the best provision to meet their needs. There's a lot out there. Employers are likely to need help. People who are out of work, are at risk of being out of work, or who are facing their career being sort of affected by these megatrends, by these changes in the economy, have the opportunity to make really good choices about their next steps and sort of how they go about that. So I hope that sort of gives us a bit of a starting point and opens up for some other people to leap in.
Yeah, it does. Anybody else want to continue on that?
Yeah, certainly. I think if I go 10 years back, my career started in the welfare to work sector. So I was on the front line as an employment advisor in some of the most socially deprived areas of England, and it was my task with a very high caseload to support unemployed people back into employment. And I think um, if I was to be a job coach or an employment advisor now, I try and put myself in their shoes and the difficulties and complexities that have kind of happened as a result of COVID and the displacement of activity and jobs. I think is a real challenge that we need to think about. And just touching on some of what Becky has said and what you said at the beginning, Paul, 85 initiatives is a lot. And don't get me wrong, I'm very proud and very supportive of the COVID recovery and the fact that it is got skills at the heart of it. And it's got employer incentives and it's driving the right activities to create opportunities. I'm very comfortable with all of that. However, 85 initiatives is a hell of a lot to navigate. Now, if you're an organisation that delivers employment related services and skills development for people, it's going to be a difficult task to navigate all of the different rules, complexities that come with those different programs, and not forgetting the differences that we're going to require in terms of employer and business engagement. Because if you think about some of the sectors that have really struggled, hospitality, travel and tourism, etc., and then the sectors that have probably done well. There are still sectors that have performed significantly well during the last 18 months. So warehousing, logistics, health and social care, business services, those employers have got enough on. And so it's the engagement with those employers to identify those opportunities that I think is going to be a real challenge for providers at the moment.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I concur with Dan. This is no, it sounds obvious, but this is no clearly simple, normal recession. You know, even if you take medical emergency out of this, which is difficult to do, so I appreciate the fact that our normal go-to recovery sectors are totally and utterly decimated, whether by a normal rundown in kind of high street retail, or whether it be the COVID response, the challenges around hospitality being open. As employability providers of services, they would be places where cohorts of people would naturally find employment to recover. So we've got a real challenge, and I'm with Dan. You know, the skills agenda is so high on this, and out of absolute necessity. Because we need to retrain and redevelop people. And the second thing about this is that we have significant disadvantage, as Becky said, across particular groups within our community: young people, older workers, ethnic minorities, women, and in essence, you know, that's the real challenge to address, and one that won't be addressed quickly. The last thing I'll say is the programs that have been instigated. 85 is a huge number, isn't it? But we're all quite keenly focused on apprenticeships and traineeships, and of course Restart at this moment in time. And I think they will go a long way to tackling the challenge, and the challenge is such a huge one. But Dan is absolutely right. The employer engagement activity, and I don't particularly like that term, but access to employers and working with employers is so key for them to understand what support is available and what can happen, and B, not to be barraged by hundreds of people every day going, this is what I have to offer, this is what we can do, isn't it fantastic, we're getting the UK economy back on track. So I think that's the last thing I'll say, and the call out, I think, to all providers in our community is we need a bit more joined up activity around that setting.
Kathleen.
I think picking up on Scott's point, the type of crisis that we're in and the different sectors that affect it obviously have huge implications for how this plan for jobs is actually going to pan out. Obviously, I think it is just so different right now because of the types of firms that have been essentially frozen, with a little bit of a burst over summer, and then they've sort of been locked down, in lockdown since autumn. And that has really big implications for the types of people who are affected. So, nearly half of the fall in employment that's occurred since the coronavirus has occurred amongst young people. And I guess that's not really surprising given the fact that we know young people are way disproportionately more likely to work in sectors like hospitality and leisure and retail. And then, that makes it really hard to sort of think, well, what can we do with them if they can't find work? We can put them into apprenticeships. Well, there's a reason why we've seen an even bigger fall in apprenticeship starts, is because where can they go? And I think, looking forward, sort of the short to medium term, I think there's probably like a certain level of optimism that, we've got this vaccine rollout coming, come spring and summer, everyone's going to be back in the pub, spending money. It might not work out like that, and even if it does, it's not going to be at full capacity. And I just think, particularly in the hospitality sector, they're going to struggle to take on as many people back as they normally would have. And who's going to get left out of that? Who's going to get left out of that group? Maybe it will be young people. We've already seen a big hit to the proportion of ethnic minorities who have fallen out of employment. So there's a big question about who's going to get hired back when we see that recovery, if that recovery is as big as we're hoping. And then also, when firms are opening up again, just what's that quality of work going to look like? Are we going to see a return, a ramping up again in things like 0 hours contracts and sort of negative types of flexible employment?
Dan.
I think I agree completely with Kathleen and again Scott's points. What I would like to do is, if we look at one of the initiatives in a bit more detail, so the money that's been directed towards the increased number of sector-based work academies, for example, and I think whilst I agree with that, and in my time working at colleges and within training providers, I had a very good relationship with Job Centre Plus, and we delivered very successful sector-based work academies across the East Riding and the Humber, and had very good progression into employment as a result of that. I think one of the things that we need to consider now, and with there being more sector-based work academies driving those outcomes, is not losing sight of the outcome itself, and not just delivering a sector-based work academy for its sake. I understand that people will not just be looking at different occupations in terms of how they secure different opportunities, but also addressing some of those core transferable meta skills around their communication, their creativity, their resilience, etc., and how people re-engage in the world of work, which is very different to how it was 18 months ago. So I think whilst I agree with sector-based work academies and their approach and absolutely driving that engagement and activity and outcome, we need to make sure that the outcomes are there, and that we're not putting people through sector-based work academies. Absolutely, if they leave with skills, fantastic, but they need to be in a better place to navigate what is going to be a very highly competitive labour market.
Scott?
Yeah, just on that point, I mean, the really interesting dynamic here is I talked about, and Kathleen and Becky have as well, sectors that are completely decimated by this pandemic. But the interesting dynamic here is that the employability sector is vastly growing as a sector, as a work-related occupation sector. I appreciate there's a bit of a dichotomy there between, but we are estimations over this period are in the next 2 years we need anything from 20,000 to 40,000 extra people operating in this sector. And so, it's not a call to action, this podcast, but if anyone is out there with related skills, come and help us all get the UK economy back on track. This is what we need to do. So, we're not one of the Treasury growth sectors, which I think is quite ironic. But it is the employability sector is the only sector that will enable all those other sectors to grow, because our members and the people that work within the sector are the people that coach, support, mentor, develop the skills, and enable people to move into those sectors.
Yeah, I mean, it just really strikes me that a weakness in our system generally is around career services and advice about careers, and employability professionals clearly play a crucial role in that, not only through the advice they offer, but through the referrals they make. They understand the funding system, what people are entitled to access. Because people just don't know that there's any kind of career service there. There's some lovely work going on by various people to also think about sort of common skills between different occupations being affected by the megatrends, by COVID, um, and sort of getting that kind of information to people so they can make informed choices about whether it's training, whether it's a sector-based work academy, actually whether it's a boot camp that might get them where they need to be, where they want to be, would be incredibly helpful. But really interesting point from Scott about the growth there that's not recognised.
So I must admit, I mean, we've always thought that side of things, the work coaches, the job support, etc., was just quietly ticking along in the background and just doing what it wanted to do. It never raised its head above the parapet, and all of a sudden, it's under the spotlight in a massive, massive way. And like you say, there's 20 to 40,000 extra people required in order to support, even things like through the JETS program and stuff like that, to support people understand and navigate the way through, the initiative minefield, if you want to call it, is a huge, huge ask.
I don't think a lot of people realise that the employability sector exists. I certainly think I didn't, and I'm from a very working class background, and I knew what a job centre was, and I knew people went to the job centre for benefits, etc., etc. Until I started working in it, I didn't realise that there was this whole other industry that supports the economy and people get into careers that are sustainable. And I think if you look at the DWP restart and the amount of money that has been put into new programs as follow on from previous welfare to work programs, I think the government and the Department for Work and Pensions are taking the right approach, because some of the things that I've seen on the restart, particularly around the procurement exercise, is that it's going to be one main provider per region, whereas historically you had two and there was more competition. I absolutely believe that that approach is the right thing to do, because it will mean that that provider isn't worrying about, market share or getting the right amount of referrals. It's that provider is going to be working in that region, focused on the outcomes for those participants on that program. And for me, that is a positive step forward.
Yes, Becky.
I just wanted to add to Dan's points there that the evidence of active labour market policy shows the importance of the advisory relationship. So it's that rapport within the relationship, as well as continuity of advisor, that is strongly linked and correlated with the outcomes people achieve, which just, shows how fundamental it is we get that right.
I'm really pleased you said that, because that's bread and butter to me in terms of the advisor relationship. That's really important. But just back to Dan's point, you're absolutely right. And there is now a real push as well around continuous improvement and quality assurance, and there have been some fantastic delivery programs in the past and some fantastic people doing some fantastic things. But I think assuring that and having a framework that really effectively manages that is really important. And Becky, to your point, the first start of that is a career pathway for people practicing within our sector. And that's one of the challenges, I think, prior to that career pathway being available, and prior to sort of the COVID pandemic, employability sector was not seen as a career of choice, because there was no way that you could, in essence, have a standardized way of developing your skills and progressing. Now there is, it's absolutely out there. And back to your absolute point, Becky, the active ingredient in any successful employability-based program is the trust that the advisor builds with the individual. There's nothing else works. It doesn't matter if you have the best process, the best databases, the best culture. That is absolutely it. And the only way you get that skill of being able to do that is through training, developing, and learning, and making sure that you have the heightened skills required.
I do think that when I was an employment advisor, I think people would rather go to work than come and see me, because I was that annoying. I think when they'd come in and I go, right, okay, so what have we done in the last 2 weeks? And they'd go, oh, there ain't anything, and I'd say, you're lying. I can find it in 10 minutes. Why can't you find it in 2 weeks? So I think they got that fed up of me. They'd rather go to work. So my performance was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, sorry, just back on Dan's point. This is really interesting. I also wonder whether or not, if there's been a change in the marketplace and the perception. As you say, employability is front and center. It's now, the next phase in us all getting back on our feet, as it were, in the economy. But do you think there's a change in potential attitude and expectation? Do you think that customers, not that the expectation shouldn't be high as we deliver services to everybody, but as people are coming en masse, as they potentially have been waiting around for some time, as they are out of work totally due to COVID, in essence, and the economy diminishing, do you think there is a level of expectation that's going to be built? Obviously, there's loads of political capital in that, and everyone's talking about it. So I'll put that out to my colleagues on the call, really.
Kathleen, can I ask you your comments on that one first, please?
Sure, yeah. No, I think that's really important. It's a really central question, particularly as someone who doesn't work in the employability sector and sort of has like a more of a bird's eye view of the different initiatives government are taking on. There does quite often seem to be this focus on, okay, well, we are expecting unemployment to reach about 2.2 million by Christmas. But don't worry, it's fine because we've got all these great initiatives to cover it, including things like Restart and Kickstart. And of course, we have to celebrate the fact that government are putting money into these initiatives and thinking really carefully about how they design things like Restart. But I almost wonder if it's a huge amount of expectations on programs like Restart, just given the fundamentals of the economy are going to be quite less than what we would have hoped for some time. And just because there's, even thinking about the budget yesterday, whilst there was some great stuff around business investment, there you've kind of got like the employability stuff on one side, but there's not much happening on creating jobs and thinking about growth sectors on the other side. So in a way, it's putting a whole amount of pressure on employability that might be difficult, in the next couple of years.
Yeah, Dan.
I think I absolutely agree, and going to what Scott raised, it's more publicized now. So, we have all these press conferences and we see all, the budgets and everything else coming out, and employment, programs, welfare to work programs, etc., are more commonly known than they ever have been. So I think it's an absolute right for any individual who's been referred to a program for support that they have the right to the highest possible standard of support. Going on what Becky said earlier, that advice, that guidance, that rapport with the employability practitioner who's delivering that program. So it's an absolute right, regardless of at what entry point, what age, what background, how long you've been unemployed, that you get the fundamental quality of service and support. And another thing I just want to mention is never before have I seen the skills agenda so closely aligned to the employability and welfare to work sector. So if you think about the further education white paper, and the regional focus on skills and the skills plans within that, and you compare that to the DWP restart and the employer incentives around traineeships and apprenticeships, I have never in my 10 years of working in this industry seen employability and skills so closely aligned. It's happened before, and it's happened by accident or by good luck and being savvy with how to utilize different pots of funding. But the parallel now against the skills agenda and employability is the best I've seen in the last 10 years.
Becky?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I just wonder whether we will see tensions between that kind of work first and that skills acquisition agendas there, and we know Job Centre Plus, if we just take, are comfortable around the sector-based work academy placement model. It's pretty quick. There's an interview at the end of it. Sort of job outcomes, as Dan's already highlighted, can be quite good. Equally, they were, and in the past it was clear when we were doing an evaluation of another training program introduced back in 2010 for young people, they actually like the traineeships because of the attachment to an employer. So that kind of got a longer term training scheme sort of into their agenda. But I wonder how far we will see people guided towards the best provision for their needs. And there has to be sort of segments around that. And the incentives may not be there for anybody doing employability, certainly for those sort of within the public employability service. And that requires consideration because we do have a lot of options there. But sort of full-time, sort of more substantial training offers may not be quite as well incentivized as it might seem. I'd also say we've had incentives for employers operate sort of different incentives in the past, such as the apprenticeship grant, the youth contract wage subsidy, and it wasn't straightforward. And it didn't change the world, to come back to one of Kathleen's points. So yeah, lots to watch.
Yeah, I'm with Becky on this. I think there is going to be this quite natural push and pull between skills and work first as we move through delivery of these programs. I think that is going to come slightly further down the line. I think we have a little bit of breathing space at the moment, but not much. I'd say it's a personal opinion, not a professional opinion. I would like to have thought, though, that um, the bringing together of skills and employability had been much more of a kind of strategic design principle rather than a necessity. And I think, I'm okay with a necessity if it builds into a strategic and policy and design principle. But we are in the situation we're in, and we have to deal with what we've got.
Just a quick question: how well do you think employers are engaging in the current initiatives? Are we seeing positivity? Are we seeing confusion? Are we seeing some hold back? Dan.
Well, I think there's so many initiatives, and I think that is where confusion may come from. And don't forget that employers are focusing on keeping their businesses open. I do believe that, the focus of employer is to make sure that their business is continuing to trade. So I think navigating some of these 85 initiatives is going to be not at the top of their to-do list. And I think, for me, the kind of, if I was to champion anything, it would be around the stimulation of the labour market itself. And all of these initiatives are fantastic, but they will only work if there is an outcome and a job at the end for that individual to go into.
Yeah, Kathleen.
Yeah, just thinking about two of the initiatives specifically. A lot of us had expected Kickstart to be extended past December of this year, just given the fact that there have been, over 100,000 jobs created, but only, I think 1,500 around that young people have been able to start those jobs. And so on the one hand, it was like, okay, there's some indication that employers are engaging with this. But obviously, we've been in a national lockdown. No one's been able to start these jobs. Should it not be extended? And now that it hasn't, I think it might will be in the future. But it does raise a really important question of employers are engaging, but to what extent are they bringing on the kids who would benefit the most from it? Are they just essentially just doing the equivalent of picking from the cream of the crop, really, or are they picking up young kids for whom the program was initially designed? And if we are in a world where that program isn't going to be extended, so there's fewer jobs than we might have expected, it's really important that the employers who do engage with it do so. Thinking about those kids who would struggle most to find a job outside of it, and then also thinking about the outcomes of it, as Dan rightly pointed out. Can we link that to apprenticeships at the end of it? What will occur? What will exist for those kids once they finish those jobs in 6 months' time? And then also just on the apprenticeship bonus, there has been an apprenticeship bonus in existence since August. Take-up's been kind of low, about 1 in 5 apprenticeship starts since then was because of the bonus. One of the good things about it was that the bonus is for new hires, so it's a little bit harder to use as work-related training. But it's hard to see big take-up of that, given that firms are going to struggle to take on people at the moment, let alone take on apprentices. But yeah, I think just thinking really hard about where employers target their efforts here.
Yeah, Becky.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of evidence, isn't there, that employers really don't like administrative burdens. And if a scheme seems complex, it's going to be off-putting. We know some employers, so we did research with some low-income households, and there's people out there who weren't offered furlough because their employers just felt the scheme was too complicated to get involved in. And similarly, we've seen this in the apprenticeship grant work and the youth contract work from years ago. You've got to make sure these are simple to be part of. But as Kathleen says, it's hard to avoid some elements of dead weight in these programs. That's a terrible term because everybody deserves opportunities to progress, but whether the schemes actually sort of target in the end the people they will really need to, well, yeah, it's yet to be seen. I do think it's a complex world. We're asking an awful lot of employers. We ask them not only to get involved in these schemes at a time when they're under pressure trying to sort of get recovered, but we're also asking them to engage in the skills system more generally, to be part of careers advice in school, offer T-level placements, offer work experiences. The demands on them are huge, and actually they just want to crack on and get their businesses back at the moment. And I think that's a huge risk.
Wonderful. So, if you had the power, what aspect, what one part of the agenda would you really want to champion, take forward to make sure that it continued to work for the benefit of the employers, of the providers, of the learners, and ultimately the country?
I think just going back to what I said earlier is around making sure that there is I would champion the stimulation within the labour market. And I also think making sure that of all the initiatives that are out there, that we don't compete against each other. So all these different schemes, and again, if you're a training provider delivering these, you're going to be payment by results. So you need to make sure that you're getting the right outcomes for the individual and that they're sustainable. So my priority and what I would champion certainly for the participant and that end user is making sure that we are creating jobs as a country and making sure that these programs don't compete for the same outcome.
Excellent. Scott?
Yeah, you'll forgive me for saying this, but at a time when we are mobilizing thousands of people to help support people in brand new contracting and linking up public sector, private sector, and charitable sector delivery, I would like to see, and I have some power to affect this, one standard of practice that enables people to deliver excellent quality services that enable the outcome that Dan speaks about. And a link to that, a building on the continuous improvement and quality agenda to make sure that every single person that comes into a service, wherever that may be, is not taking a lottery ticket or based on the organisation or the individual that they're seeing. So for me, that would be the biggest thing. And if they want to be a member of the IEP as well, that would be fantastic.
Love it. Kathleen?
Sure, I think it's really hard to pick just one, but yeah, I think picking up on Dan's point, I mean, absolutely critical that we have measures to really genuinely stimulate the labour market, stimulate demand for employees, and I think running alongside that though, just not forgetting, not repeating the mistakes of what happened after the financial crisis, which was, we did eventually see employment ramp up to quite, to record levels going into this pandemic, but we also did see a ramping up of poor quality work, and we need to make sure that when we, I'm not going to use, well, I will use it, Build Back Better, that actually, it genuinely is. So yeah, I think don't forget the quality of work through all of this.
Wonderful. And definitely not least, Becky.
So I'm going to be greedy and sort of take all the recommendations that the others have made. So if I can have those, and particularly keep an eye on the quality of work, I want the glue and the navigation put in place so that we can, get the right match for employers, get the right match for individuals, get the right quality of intervention. Which one's right for both to make that work and make sure those outcomes, are secured and there for good careers in the future.
Excellent. And just for my tuppenny worth, I think if I put it in, I think the key word that I would use is sustainability. That we keep this focus and we keep this joined up approach. If I want to use that a bit of spin phrase between the DWP and the DFE, and to keep that joint working, moving forward, to help everybody, with, of course, the full support of employers in the background. You're quite right. We are asking employers to do way more than what they've traditionally done in the past. And the sustainability of effort from everybody, I think, will to a degree see us through some of this, if not most of it, and hopefully the outcome I'm hoping will definitely be of benefit to everybody. So that's absolutely wonderful. So a fabulous discussion here. Thank you very much. So I'd like to thank everybody this morning. So I'd like to thank Becky from the Institute for Employability Study. Thank you to Dan from NCFE. Scott from the Institute of Employability Professionals, and Kathleen from the Resolution Foundation. Thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting and I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the NCFE podcast. You can find out more about NCFE, our guests and supporting information and links relating to this topic at ncfe.org.uk/podcast.